So this is existing, demoed in new construction, and I'm in phase two. All right, Jared, you had one. So you were talking about the future phase, right?
When I looked back and I saw when you had that session, it was 3 years ago. So then I felt like I was really behind when I did that. But my projects they can last somewhere up to, a year or two. So it's like, I started in whatever it was, Revit 23. So I didn't update my template till now. So
Hmm.
kind of in 25 and trying to get, I remember seeing that video. So I wanted to kind of change our settings because listen to that, it's basically like the old phasing was kind of an antiquated system. So I liked how everything was, and
Yeah.
Aaron made it seem really simple. And
Uh-huh.
then the issue that I had once we did that was when the none was on, it basically wasn't showing any of the existing or so forth. And I may have, after I wrote that, I kind of worked on it a little bit yesterday. I may have somewhat solved it. I just want to make sure I'm down the right path.
Hmm.
I realized that I think in addition, what I had to do was to then create an existing phase, you have to have a future phase, you have to have an existing phase, and change your symbology for that. And like even a demo phase, I had to have even a demo phase because now you're using basically your filters as your phasing, if I understand it correctly. And I think once I did that, it seems to be working now, but I don't know if I'm doing what the intent was.
Yeah, you might be overcomplicating it.
That's most likely I am. It's like,
The concept, regardless of what you're doing it for, whether it's window types, wall types, doors, whatever you're using this, and some people like prehistoric phase or the future phase, either one. The difference with prehistoric phase is you have to demo the objects, right? So you can put, let's say we're doing walls, or for the sake of the fact that I have this open, it's stair details for some reason, right? So we'll put, maybe we have a whole bunch of stairs that for whatever reason we have details. So pretend this is your wall details, whatever, right? Um, Prehistoric would mean before existing, and you would have to basically make sure that anything on there gets demoed, right? That's the key, right? Um, Before existing, basically. So it would all have to get demoed in existing, so then it doesn't exist in existing. That's kind of why a lot of people don't like prehistoric phase, because you added an extra step of having to demo stuff. In the future phase, or the whatever you want to call it phase, you don't have to demo anything because it's after your project, so it doesn't visually
Mhm.
show up before anything ahead of time. So um, you don't. So Aaron's process, Aaron's templates are very filter driven for lots of different reasons, and I agree with a lot of it. When it comes to this workflow, it doesn't even need to be filter driven. It can be face filter driven completely. And so what I mean by
Okay.
that is, if I was to set it up on this is just the out of the box template, right? And so I wanted these stairs to be part of my future phase for, whatever details or something I'm drawing, or in every project, et cetera, right? Um, you know, I'm going to make sure that I have a future phase set up. All I need is existing, new, and then after this, I'll call it this future phase, or some people call it standards, some people call it
Mm,
um,
future. That's what we go with
whatever.
future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
standards, futures, typicals. There's all kinds of names that you see, right? So this is after new construction. So obviously, if you
Yeah.
had a multi-phase project, you need to make sure it's before this as well, right? So, this has to be your last phase in the job, right? No
Yeah.
matter what. So let me just get rid of this.
And that looks pretty much how I have my phasing, how we had
Yep,
our phasing set up. We have an
yep,
existing, new, and then just a future for
yep.
stuff.
And so then if I take these stairs, I shouldn't have to grab the railings, right? So if I take these stairs, and these are created in standards phase, of course I have to grab the railings. So those are all in the standards phase, right? So unless I go to a view that has that, I don't even know they exist. The other thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure that these objects exist in a place that can't interact with your building, right? So um, I don't remember if Aaron uses sea level, if he has a level that's even below that, or something I can't remember, or it's off to the side. Either way, you want these objects to not be at 0, 0 at your origin when you're starting your project. because even if they're future or prehistoric phases, future not as much, but it still can happen. They can interact with other phases, right? Walls are a perfect example. If you're doing wall types,
Hmm.
right? So if I draw a wall type on here, wall type on here, right? So this is in new construction, right? But then I have my standard wall types that are like this for whatever reason, right? Here's my standard wall types. I throw those on the future phase, right? So that's okay. If you do the prehistoric phase, it may not be okay. Or if you introduce a phase, it may, but it may interact with these objects, right? If you do the prehistoric phase, it's 100% going to interact with these objects because even though it's getting demoed, it's doing that stupid blend thing. So the usual tip is to keep it out of the way. So some people like to put it way off to the side. Some people make a level called standards, and maybe it's at negative 800 or something. The downfall to that is if you don't have good views set up and you jump to a default view, you're going to have these objects down at 800 feet, right? If they're on, right? That kind of thing. Um, so anyway, so future fate. So you can see I'm modeling all this stuff here. If I want to set up a view that shows them, I mean, it's actually pretty straightforward. I'll duplicate this view for now, right? So I'm just going to do show standards, but I'm going to do show new. No, this is out of the box, right? Oh, that's what I'm talking about. There it goes. It goes the other way. So, so see how the it's always the previous phase interacts with the future
Yeah.
phase. So those walls, see how they're interacting with my standards walls. That's what you obviously
Hmm.
don't want, right? They won't affect the drawings, but they're affecting your standards, which is the drawings. So you see, it's only showing new. It's not going to show the previous stuff. None is just no filter. It should technically show everything. None, but show all is really what you want to show when you show. None means that there's no filters on. So none should turn everything on without any filters overriding it.
Yeah.
Right? Show all is going to show filters. That's why it's half tone for existing. But your views are simple. It's just standards and show new. That's it. And then whether it's a floor plan, doesn't matter, right? It's the exact same process. So that's it. I mean, that's setting it up. That's the future phase. So now you take all your details, all your model elements, whatever it is that you're trying to do, windows, doors, whatever the heck it is, and you just bring them into standards phase, right? Or future phase, whatever you want to call it. Make sure they're not in an area where the building's going to be, whether it's dropping them below it. Like I said, I feel like I remember in Aaron's things doing like he had like a fucking 800 feet below or something like that. I don't remember. Below sea level type of level or something like that. I don't even know if I did that or not. What did I do? No, it didn't let me copy it. Oh, there we go. And then he put everything on this, and even maybe label this standards. Um, Maybe you call it X standards or something that puts it out of the way of other levels. I don't know, that kind of stuff. But then that way you know that this stuff is not interacting um, with the actual building. Oh, I copied, didn't move. Oops. Anyway, so now you can see this isn't getting chopped by that other wall, right? And if I go to show all, the wall's up here, right? And so the idea with that is you actually should never even see that when you're working on a project, right? And ideally, you're working on the project. Those are just sitting there doing the details. So the only time you actually need to see them, right, is when you're looking at the standard door sheet or wall sheet or whatever the heck it is that you're using those for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it does to some degree. I guess my workflow might be a little bit different than what maybe you're used to. Because I guess when we think of it of the existing current, so we'll say existing new construction and future
Hmm.
phases. Majority of the time, yes, we're working on new construction. We do a lot of retrofits. And so a lot of times we're going to show an existing building or existing area of that building that you want to show kind of screen back. So you're going to draw all that stuff on the existing phase,
Hmm.
and you're going to want to see that on your construction documents.
Yep.
And then there are times when we're making provisions for future work. So we may show a future equipment or something in there, and we want to show that all in the same place. So we're making provisions for it to be in there. So we want to see that on the final drawings. Here's a future location or so forth. So
So you're not talking about standard details. You're talking about actual phasing. I'm sorry. I
phasing,
thought you were talking
yeah.
about the standard. So the future phase that
I'm
Aaron
sorry. I
was
should
talking
have
about,
stopped. Yeah.
what he's doing is he's making typical details. So instead of having legend views for which is two-dimensional views for like your wall types or door elevations, for example, right? Door
Yeah.
elevations a lot of times are two-dimensional. What he's doing is he's making this phase here, and then he's placing the actual elements in them, right? So and then making an elevation on a sheet that's that phase. So you're doing it all in three dimensions in your project. So you're setting
Okay.
standards. When you're talking about actual just phasing of a project, then still keeping it simple is still the way you want to go. So, existing and new, if you have multiple phases for new, then you have multiple phases. But an existing
Yeah.
project, I mean, it'd be it's as simple as you draw all your stuff. So if I'm drawing all this, and I'm even gonna draw it on, here's my floor plan. All of these are existing.
Okay.
They're already half-toned, right? That's out of the box. Existing gets half-toned when you're in a new construction view, right?
Hmm.
This view is showing all, but let's say I want to show previous plus new. Okay, so now I'm in the new view. I can do existing if I want. I can do new, whatever. Now I'm placing a component. So let's say I'm placing, uh, shit, what the hell is that? Picket. Let's say I'm placing this chair. This is new, right? This is in the new phase. It's there, right? This
Hmm.
is there. This is that. If I go, oops, jeez. If I go to existing, that disappears, right? If
Yeah.
I go to new construction, that shows up. This is halftone. If I want to only show existing in this view, I can say show previous phase. Click apply. It only shows previous phase as halftone, right? If I want to show only new, it's going to show only new, right? So you're just controlling the visibility of those two things. Um, if I show all, it's going to show all, right? It's going to, it's similar, but previous and new is the filter. If I add another phase to that, so if I go to
Yeah.
phasing,
Like a future, add the future phase to it.
yeah, so I'll insert one over here and we'll call this phase two,
Okay.
right? I'm just going to add a couple more of these. Doesn't matter what view I do them in. The views are just
Hmm.
visibility, right, of the
Hmm.
model. So it doesn't make a difference. Now I can go in here. I can say these are created on phase two. They disappear in this one because this view is set to new construction, right?
Yeah.
If I go to phase two, right, I've got phase two stuff. This is now existing because it was created on new construction, right? And then this is existing as well because it's created before phase two, if that makes sense. So the phases before it are both
Are
considered
all
existing.
good to existing.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
I go to phases, right, anything before this,
Hmm.
right, is now existing in the phase filters, right? And so what that means, remember, we only have these to work with. We have new, existing,
Yeah.
demolished, and temporary. So that's all we can. We don't have like adjacent existing. But that's also why filters came into play as a huge advantage to us, being able to phase them in 2024 or being able to filter phases in 2024 and 2025, because now you can actually modify by adjacent phases directly, right? So I can go in here and I can say, I want to create a new filter. And I'm going to call this one, uh, let's see what we want to do. New, or actually, let's say, yeah, we'll do new construction phase, which maybe it's phase one, whatever. So new construction phase. I'm gonna just do furniture because make it easy for us. Oops. What the heck was I doing? Furniture. Furniture. Now we actually have the ability to create a filter by phase. This is new in 24 and 25.
Hmm.
So what's nice about that is I can say, so if this equals phase created equals new construction, I can now graphically control it differently. So if I don't want that to half tone, right? There was no way to do it before because it was always it was always
Yeah. It was
existing.
always out.
Now I can
Okay.
add this, which I always do this. Try add this here. Now I can say I don't want this to half tone. Um, and I don't know, I can make it let's see, the lines will make them black. Just to be so you can see that. And now click OK. And now you can see they're not half-toned anymore, even though this is created in the previous phase. So
Okay.
you're overriding the views phase filter with an actual visibility filter.
I
You could
got it.
technically ignore visibility filters and only use view filters. I wouldn't necessarily go that route because the the view filters are the ones that abide by the laws of time, right? And so
No, they do. Yeah.
if you start doing demo, then you're really starting to ask you're starting to ask questions of the view filter over the phase filter as opposed to not. So like this is existing. If I demoed it in new construction, you can see it's not there here. If I go to new construction, you can see it's not there. But if I want to show previous plus demo, graphically it's doing what I want. If I go to phase two, it's not there because it was demoed during phase one, right?
Hmm.
So, so technically you can get rid of phase filters in Revit now if
Yeah,
you
because
wanted to.
you would set that to none then, and if you set it to none, you're being
Then
controlled
you're only
100% then.
using view filters, correct? Which it has pros and cons, right? Like I said, it's pros and cons. But that's how you would now. That's how we were given this second level of control over filters or
Yeah.
over phases. I'm sorry, by having that, which again didn't exist until 2024. So before that, I couldn't even tell you. You had no choice. You were beholden by the time. That's it.
Well, I mean, the way the workaround that I created for it up until this point, once again, when I was doing that was I created a view. I did was using a view filter. I used a view filter that was looking for future. So it was looking for anything that said future in it, whether it be uppercase, lowercase, whatever. So every object that you wanted to be future, you had to type in future somewhere in the comments or whatever, which
Right,
typically you
right. You
would.
couldn't use the phase. You had to make a parameter that then would control
Exactly.
it.
That was them controlling it, which worked. It's just once again now it's based on operator making sure you type future in there or you making sure somebody typed
Correct.
future
And
correctly.
it
Well,
loses and it
you don't
loses
spell it right.
it loses the concept of time for phasing,
It
which
loses
is
the
an
concept
important
of
one,
time
right?
for it as
Because
well.
now
Yeah.
you can make things graphically look all wonky, doesn't matter, right? You're basically using a filter or
Yeah.
of a phase as any type of parameter, which works because
Yeah.
it gives the flexibility now, but it's not necessarily the best approach because then things like demo and existing and you lose some of that stuff. But
That's where I'll dig I'll have to dig into a little bit more. I'm kind of right in between projects right now, so I'm kind of up against it as far as making a decision pretty quick as opposed to spending
mhm.
a lot of time in the template. But I'll dig into a little bit deeper because the way I currently set it up going reading was that is I created three essentially another filter because for the what you're showing there to show the existing to
Mhm.
truly show existing, then I have that being controlled by a view filter as well, and it shows as
Yeah,
existing. So, but I'm using it to
right.
turn in phase filtering off.
Yeah. Again, I don't
So
think
it's
I don't think it works. Like I don't think I'm not necessarily
yeah,
opposed to it because you do technically you have more flexibility now if you're using filters over phase filters, for example, or view filters, whatever you want to call them,
yeah,
over this tool down here. Um,
yeah,
it's just one of those things where, yeah, you would also need to make sure whoever's using the template understands if they're a Revit user for a long time, that's a new concept, right? Um,
yeah, exactly.
and and then you're still using the phasing tool for the elements, but it's
Exactly
just
for the
you're not
elements, yeah,
necessarily using the phasing tool for the view, which can be
for the
confusing
view.
for users too.
And that got really confusing, guys. I because I had somebody testing it initially, and that was his problem.
But it
So
is, I
he,
mean, to be fair, it is it's a valid path forward that you know,
it
maybe
gives you more
something
control.
it may be something that, yeah, it's because right now there was a little bit of a contradicting functions between these two.
Yeah,
As I mentioned before, the only control you had before was this, right?
yeah, yeah.
Whereas now you can do what I'm showing here. So you can have a phase filter or a view filter for each phase per
Hmm.
the view and then go through it. Demo might be kind of weird because I don't think you can do a filter for demo, right? Like demoed
Demo,
in,
you can. It
you
does allow
can.
you.
Okay.
Where demo got tricky is because the way that demo was pulling in, something was existing, but it was also
But
demolished.
that's where
So
it
it
gets
half
tricky
toned it.
because demo isn't a phase in Revit technically. Demo is
Yeah.
it's a
Uh,
uh, a
temporary
verb.
condition, I guess.
It's a
Yeah.
verb.
Yeah.
Let's say
Yeah.
it's something that's happening in a phase, and that's where it
Yeah.
gets tricky. Um, and so I think for this to work, I think do you need demo to be a phase or no? I don't even know. Trying to think of it. Demo test. So if I do that wall, let's just do walls. Walls.
It got a little weird, but I
So
I
you
think
can
it
do phase demolished, right?
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, so I guess technically it could work that way, but it does get a little tricky.
it gets a little
I guess
tricky.
the benefit there is that you can show demo further forward. I don't remember what I just called that. Does anyone remember what the hell I just called that?
Demo
Demo
test,
test?
wasn't
Okay,
it?
there we go. All right. So technically, so if I put this as red, this, get a little weight.
Let's see if this happens. What happened to me yesterday?
Okay, so now if I go, uh, so I'm in new construction. If I go to phase two, disappears. My guess is that's contradicting the phasing tool to some extent where it's not showing. Kind of weird. So that's because that's showing new. It's showing the infill. So if I go to phase two, yeah, that's the problem is it's showing the infill as well, right? Um, or no, that's the piece that was demoed.
That's the piece that's demoed. So how does
So
your
you gotta do,
filters
so you'd still have to do, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work.
how's your filter set up? So on your filter, so your cut.
Yeah, it's, I did the projection lines. That's why you're not seeing that there. But
Yeah.
I also, it's the same. I wanted to make it something different than the demo. So hold on, let's do
Oh yeah, that's true.
pink and let's do a different line type. Okay, so that's new construction. If I do show none, that's still working. If I do phase two, all right, that works. Okay, that's how I was expecting it to do it. So no, it does work. It does work. So I'm in
See
phase two.
yeah, where mine was acting up is because that wall was existing, it was half toning the demo as well. So when I had none turned on in that wall, that was an existing wall.
So this is existing, demoed in new construction, and I'm in phase two. I was just trying to.
Maybe,
So
yeah.
so so if I go to phase one, it should be the same. But if I go previous plus new, it's gonna hide because in previous plus new, it's hiding demo.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
how it works. If you go to none, then you're gonna have no filters, obviously, and this will show. But you will run into issues with the infill showing, right? If there's an infill, if you're like putting a window or something like that, and that'll overlap with the graphic. But you are
Yeah.
this does what I was trying to figure out is now can I show phase one demo stuff during phase two? And I can because of this, which is interesting.
It's and I think the honest way to try it and it'll be perfect time. I'll try it on my newest project and it's that's really going to be the trial and error, see if it works on a new as you go through a project because that's going to be the real test. I mean, that's where we found the other issue.
Yeah.
And, I have my old filter built in there, so we can always default back to how we had it before. But this seemed to be a better way to control it because now, you can select a bunch of objects and say, put them on this phase. It's a lot harder to do that if you're trying to type something in for future.
Yeah.
So this seemed to
Yeah.
be the better way to do it.
I could see this also creating a few extra view templates as well. Because you're relying on these to control your phasing. And that may not always jive with the other stuff happening in the view. So you may have to have as opposed to like if you're just using this, you could pull those out. I guess you could. That's probably in the template too, depending on what you're doing. Okay, yeah, no, that's an interesting.
I'll
I'm
keep you
curious to see moving
posted.
forward
Yeah, I'll keep
if
you posted, see how it does.
people may start. And I think I remember. I think Paul Aubin was somebody who mentioned it when we were first talking about 2024. How saying like we don't need phasing filters anymore or whatever, and
It
so
sounds like
I
something
guess
Paul would say.
if you approach it that way, then I guess yeah, I mean.
It it it
You'd have to build the template that way because it has to be. I mean, the only way to do it efficiently would be through the template. Um, but it is an interesting thought. It does give you control.